There's three people who'd like to come in, so I'm going to go Elspeth, Elaine, Mike, and I think Alistair wanted it. And if you're very brief, I can get all four of you in. So.
There's certainly scientific work that is undertaken in the catching industry that is funded through EMFF. It's not necessarily pure research, but for example, we manage a programme of independent fisheries observers that work that, and that's the data and the information that they gather is an important contribution to the stock assessment that goes into international stock assessment for management. And we also run a programme on gear technology, looking at improving gear to make it more selective, to help drive conservation objectives, etc. So certainly in the catching side, we absolutely support the need for there to be replacement for EMFF.
I think, yes, of course, we would support having something else, and I would echo what Jimmy has said as well in terms of making sure that it's going into the right places, because I have heard of fisheries funds that have actually went on to impede fishermen by developing different things in harbours, which haven't helped. So it's just about how we do those types of things. It's really important. And I think also looking to the Norwegian model of how they have a fisheries levy on the fishermen themselves to help towards marketing and towards science, and it's 1.3%. I don't know any fishermen who wouldn't be willing to contribute to that if it meant there was neutral science which was developed and it helped us all in going forward, and that's really what we need.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I guess as an industry, we've never really favoured EMFF funding for building new vessels or anything, because we always viewed it that if you had to wait on Monday morning for a cheque coming in for a subsidy for your business to survive, then you had no chance of surviving. And I guess there's other industries have suffered as a result of that. What I would like to say is that we would like to see MFF continued in some form in the onshore sector, because we're only as good as the onshore sector is in terms of strength. I would fully support what Elaine said in terms of industry-funded science. There is a couple of caveats there. That has got to be mandatory. And there should be no taxation without representation, so there should be fishermen on the board to see how the spend and that is created. But like Elaine, when we toured Norway, I asked every sector the same question. You must hate this. This is a tax. And every one of them said it's the best tax we pay. So we would like to get ourselves into that position. But there is still a big debate to be had in Scotland about the issue of industry financing science.
Alistair.
In inshore waters, we cannot keep supporting damaging methods of fishing. We would support a well thought out policy if it came from government, where funding was given to vessels that might change from mobile to static, and that would allow everything to maybe recover as it should be.
Callum, if you were very brief, you indicated, and I shook my head in no. If you were brief, I'll give you the final word.
Oh, thank you. Just to show some common cause with the discussion there, and welcoming the idea of having levies that can help support innovative development and science, because there's lots of good examples, SIFIDs we've heard about, and I think we all want fully documented fisheries, and you've got a sort of blockchain where you can source it right through to your supermarket. I think that's something that we could all welcome.
Okay. Wow, time's gone quickly. Thank you for everyone who came and joined this discussion. I have to say, I think in my, whatever it is, three or so years as a convener, it's been the most difficult one to convene, because I felt that I was shaking my head and saying no to rather a lot of people when they wanted to come in. I apologise if you feel that's the case. I hope you've all had a chance to put what you wanted across. I am, however, going to have to ask you very rudely to leave the room as quickly as possible, because we need to go on and discuss another matter. So while you leave the room, I'm going to suspend the meeting, ask committee members to stay in place so we can go into private session. Thank you.
My Lords, on behalf of the whole House, I would like to pay tribute to one of our most distinguished members on this, her 90th birthday, Baroness Boothwell. As noble lords will know, it is not customary to single out individual members from the Woolsack, but on this occasion I'm very happy to make an exception. Not only was the noble lady an exceptional champion of the ancient and undoubted rights and privileges of the House of Commons as their Speaker, she has continued to make an invaluable contribution to this House since she was introduced 18 years ago. She is now someone who is widely recognised as a champion of Parliament and the indispensable role it plays in our Constitution. I read recently that the noble lady had told the House magazine that she considers herself to be rather timid. Whilst that was not exactly my experience in the Commons, I think I speak for the whole House when I say that her no-nonsense approach is as refreshing today as it was the day she took up her seat in the Commons itself. She's always been independently minded, but in my experience, she's always acted with courtesy and charm, and is a role model for all parliamentarians, speakers very much included. We wish her a very happy birthday. Lord Trefgarne. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much indeed.
Lord Trefgarne.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, under the Anti-Personal Mine Ban Convention, the UK is obliged to clear the Falkland Islands as its only mined territory. After the conflict in 1982, the UK cleared all known British-laid mines. The remaining mines, spread across 122 minefields, were laid by Argentina. Since 2009, the demining programme has released over 21 million square kilometres of land and destroyed over 9,700 anti-personnel mines. The current phase of the programme will complete the mine clearance.
My Lords, I'm grateful to my noble friend for that reply. Is it not the case that there has been a new international convention on these matters quite recently, certainly since 1982, which have been much encouraged by the support of Her late Royal Highness Princess Diana, and more recently His Royal Highness Prince Harry?
Absolutely, and I'm sure I speak for everyone in your Lordship's House in paying tribute to the late Princess Diana for her incredible leadership on this particular issue in drawing attention to the issue of minefields around the world. And of course we pay tribute to His Royal Highness the Duke of Sussex in his recent trip to Angola to further highlight and continue the good work of his mother.
Generally speaking, how helpful have the Argentinians been in the clearing process? As it was always the shifting sands that were the difficulty, and requiring maps and Argentinian personnel to help identify where the minefields were in the first place in order to have a proper clearance programme.
There was a joint report done back in 2007, which the Argentinians contributed to, but we're very mindful the sovereignty of the Falkland Islands is that of the United Kingdom, and we have taken lead and sole responsibility for all continued mine clearance.
I understand from information I got from people doing mine clearance some years ago that the difficulty in the Falklands is the actual nature of the terrain or the earth, and that some of the unexploded ordnance has sunk so deep into the earth that it's very, very difficult to clear, and that was one of the reasons why we hadn't been able to have 100% clearance. But may I use the question to widen the discussion a little bit? There are so many areas in the world where there is unexploded ordnance causing serious risk to ordinary people long after the conflict has ceased. Could the Minister say a little bit about what we're doing to support MAG and other organisations in doing this valuable work internationally?
First of all, on the earlier point that the Noble Lord raised, indeed that was a point made earlier as well, I agree with him, and that has prove challenging. However, we are confident that we will, with the Ottawa Convention and the timeline set for 2024, that we will complete all the demining in the Falkland Islands. On the broader issue, we are very much committed to it. His Royal Highness's recent visit reflects our continued commitment, and we have allocated a further £100 million to this primary objective of clearing mines around the world.
I think the Noble Lord was referring to the 1997 Ottawa Landmine Treaty. Now, that aims to free the world of landmines by 2025. But coming to Angola, which the Noble Lord has just mentioned, it's likely to be 2045 before it's clear of landmines. At the end of its civil war in 2002, there were as many landmines as there were people in Angola. So what are we doing internationally to build on what Prince Harry has done in Southern Africa, particularly in Zimbabwe and Angola, in that regard? And what are we doing to ensure that in the conflict in Syria right now, we aren't, that we are discouraging, in as much as we can do so, the use of landmines there, which will cause problems in Syria for many, many years to come?
First of all, the Noble Lady is quite right, and that's why I mentioned the Ottawa Convention, and we are abiding by the extension that was granted in the Ottawa Convention as part of fulfilling our mandate in the Falkland Islands. On the issue of Angola, indeed other places, as I've already indicated, we are absolutely committed. In 2017, the UK tripled its funding for mine action around the world, and as I said in response to the previous question, we've now committed £100 million over 3 years to tackle the humanitarian and development impact of landmines as well. This is a scourge which impacts every conflict zone. I've seen it directly through various visits, and the Noble Lady mentions Syria. Of course, that remains primary concern, but we need stability and security in Syria before we can embark on any demining that may be required in that part of the world.
And I was responsible for clearing landmines in the Falkland Islands. I subsequently became chairman of the Halo Trust. The reason we stopped clearing landmines in the Falklands is because we lost, I'm not quite sure how many, it was certainly more than 2 people lost limbs clearing Argentinian landmines which were not mapped. There is new technology, but can this technology actually clear all these mines without danger to British personnel?
Well, first of all, I pay tribute to the work of my noble friend and indeed all those who are involved in this important work. Demining areas which are previously conflict-driven, it's a key priority, and those who put themselves at risk for this purpose, we pay tribute to them. My noble friend raises an important point about using technology. I assure the Noble Lord that we do deploy through our work that we do internationally the best technology available, and it's my understanding subsequent to what's happened in recent years that all demining has not resulted in any significant injury to any person cleaning or clearing landmines, rather, in the Falkland Islands.
Noble Lord the Minister, were you aware that these mines were laid in a vain attempt by the Argentinians to stop the recapture of the islands? The recapture of the islands involved a task force of over 60 warships and 73 merchant ships. 12 of those frigates and destroyers were either sunk or very badly damaged. Today, we have 19 frigates and destroyers. Does the Noble Lord the Minister not agree that it's all very well ordering frigates to replace frigates one for one? We actually need to increase the number of ships we have in our Navy to help make the seas of the world safer and to look after our interests worldwide.
Again, I'm sure, as many are, full of admiration for the Noble Lord in respect of his work that he did in Her Majesty's Navy, and I agree with him on the important role that the Navy played during the Falklands crisis. His suggestion and what he's put forward in terms of our current capacity, I'm sure my colleagues at the Ministry of Defence have noted that very carefully, and it is important that we look towards all our military across the piece, whether it's our Air Force, our Army, or indeed our Navy, to ensure it's fit for purpose for 2019 and beyond.
Hawkins, would it not agree? Does my noble friend not agree that there is a great danger of conflating the very valuable work done by Diana, Princess of Wales, who was very much mindful of the fact that the landmines she was trying to clear were in areas of high population? This does not apply to the Falklands, where all the anti-personnel mines are fenced off, and there's a minimal population there, and they avoid going anywhere near the area where they are.
Absolutely, quite right.
My noble friend's quite correct that in the Falkland Islands the areas are very clearly and carefully designated, but that important work continues to ensure that we can rid the Falkland Islands of mines altogether. And again, I emphasise the point that the work done by Princess Diana, which is currently also being led by His Royal Highness, provides focus on this important issue as a priority for all countries who can assist in this area.
Lord Naseby.
My Lord, I beg leave to ask a question standing in my name on the order paper, and in doing so declare an interest in that my daughter has a cook shop in Bedford.
My Lords, it has been an offence for many years to sell a knife to anyone under 18 in England and Wales, including kitchen knives. The Offensive Weapons Act 2019 will further strengthen the law on the online sale and delivery of knives, and we continue to work with retailers to ensure that they have effective measures in place to prevent underage sales of knives.
Is my noble friend aware that we should pay tribute to the supermarkets and others who have carried out the challenge of age? But there are two other areas, are there not, that we should seriously consider for this awful challenge that we face. Firstly, could not the Trading Standards Department do a thorough check throughout the retail trade and in some way with the online trade to ensure that everybody is complying with the age challenge? And secondly, could Her Majesty's Government not consider introducing legislation to extend the primary authority scheme to knives as soon as possible, and ideally in the Queen's Speech?
Well, I will join my noble friend in paying tribute to supermarkets and the work that they've done in this area. I think it's Morrison's and Lidl who've decided not to sell knives in store, Asda has stopped selling single knives, and other supermarkets have either stopped or restricted the sale of knives in areas where knife crime is particularly high. In terms of trading standards, it is through trading standards and the use of test purchase operations in store and online that we do enforce this Act. And the £500,000 prosecution fund, which was introduced as part of the serious violence strategy, does help trading standards to prosecute rogue retailers who repeatedly fail test purchases.
My Lords, I speak as the mother of a victim of knife crime, and I'm surprised that the No Points campaign hasn't been mentioned. Perhaps members of the House are unaware of it, but identifying which variables can be changed to make it difficult to commit that particular harm has been proven to succeed, for example, by restricting the amount of paracetamol that you can buy, leading to fewer deaths from paracetamol drug overdoses. And 60 years ago, our domestic gas supply changed from coal gas to natural gas. Thus, a means of taking one's own life, effective and to hand, was removed, and there was a profound drop in the rate of suicide. Does the Minister agree that it would be worth piloting the recommendations in the No Points campaign to see if it can achieve similar results for homicide? I think the point of the No Points campaign is simply that you don't need a point in the kitchen, and there are some very good designs available.
I totally empathise with where the noble lady is coming from, and of course she speaks from personal experience when she outlines the devastation that knives can cause to communities. I have some empathy with the No Points campaign. Of course, there are very dangerous knives that don't have points at all, like machetes. The government thinks that the controls that we've got in place at the moment, which will be strengthened by the Offensive Weapons Act, will support this. But actually there is a further point, that it is, no pun intended, that it is not just legislation that will lead to reducing and curtailing the amount of knife crime that we have seen.
Would the noble lady please join with me? And my lords.
Could I first declare my interest as Chair of National Trading Standards and therefore of an organisation which is in receipt of Home Office money to deal with the underage sale of knives. Could the noble lady tell us what further measures she thinks are necessary, first in respect of handling the problem of online sales and in connection making sure that those delivery points which are set up are properly safeguarded and properly following the law, and secondly, whether she thinks similar arrangements should be extended to the online, to the sale, whether in retail stores or online, of acids and corrosive materials.
Well, this is a subject that the Noble Lord, Lord Kennedy and others discussed with me through the a passage of the bill. We decided not, in fact, corrosive products are quite clearly labelled, but in terms of online sales, it's true that in both the online world and in the retail world, that that age has got to be verified at either end, and how either the online retailer or the street retailer does that is entirely up to them, but it is an offence to sell, to deliver to somebody either through a delivery box or indeed a residential premises without that verification.
My Lords, my Lords, my Lords. My Lords, with drawing attention of the House to my local authority interests as in the register, the APPG report on knife crime this year demonstrated a link between the very serious cuts to services to young people. So, for instance, local authority youth services have had a 70% cut in their funding. So they demonstrated a link between cuts to youth services and knife crime. Effective measures to reduce knife crime must include very significant rises in funding for youth services. Does the Noble Lord the Minister agree?
What I agree with is that the issue of knife crime is very complex, many and varied.
My Lords, I supported the recent bill.
Lords, as the Bishop of London, knife crime is a huge concern to me and one of great sorrow. I thank the Noble Baroness for her response around the No Point campaign. However, research undertaken by the Home Office Scientific Development Branch showed that round knives has significantly less penetration capabilities than pointed knives and therefore are less likely to be life-threatening. I wonder whether the Noble Baroness would comment on how they are responding to the advice given from the Home Office Scientific Development Branch.
Well, I thank the Right Reverend Prelate for that question. In terms of the round knife versus the pointed knife, as I said to the Noble Lord earlier, Noble Lady earlier, it is not necessarily the point that is lethal, hence machetes, and it is not only, the legislation is not the only solution to actually tackling this problem.
Lord Leave Trafford.
Leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper and declare an interest as the Chairman of the Association of Leading Visitor Attractions.
My Lords, the 2017 Strategic Review of DCMS-sponsored museums found that the National Museums and Galleries received £340 million in government grant in 2016-17, around 42% of their total income, which also comprised other public funding, donations and self-generated income. Year on year, this investment, maintained in real terms for the next spending review, allows them to welcome millions of visitors, promote Britain to the world, and protect and preserve their unique collections for their global audiences.
I hear what the Minister said, but in a letter to the Times last week, headlined "Neglected Museums at Breaking Point," museum chiefs and the Director of the Art Fund drew attention to the serious essential maintenance backlog at our national museums. Don't the fires at Notre Dame and the Glasgow School of Art, and indeed the costs and upheaval we now face on the parliamentary estate, point to the dangers and extra costs of putting off vital necessary work? Could I urge DCMS ministers now to shake the Javid Johnson money tree for extra resources to protect our national treasures. If the government wishes to maintain free entry, it surely has to pay for it.
Well, the noble lord is absolutely right that many of our national museums are housed in wonderful heritage buildings, but those buildings require constant upkeep, and that upkeep is obviously very expensive. To help address this, the government awarded earlier this year £44 million of one-off funding over the next 2 years to support essential maintenance for our national museums.
Does the noble lady, the Minister, share my view that my experience of visiting galleries and museums has changed quite radically in recent years since we saw the introduction and extension of the iPod and iPhones? That often, to try and see a picture, we are surrounded by people taking selfies in front of the picture, and it has changed completely from what it used to be. There is a great opportunity for museums and for galleries to raise money from this. Very simple indeed. Nobody takes a camera in unless they pay a fee to take the camera in. Could she try to run an experiment with a museum or a gallery to see how that works and just how much money could be raised?
Well, I hadn't thought about it in quite the same way as the noble lord, although when I go to a museum with my children, I spend quite a lot of time trying to stop them taking photographs of the pictures. I'm not sure about selfies, but more seriously, I'm happy to take his suggestion back to my colleague in the department.
My Lords, we reap considerable financial and cultural rewards from what is a modest state investment in our national museums, but would not the Minister admit that museums cannot continue to be shackled by association with the fossil fuel companies? It would be a sign of the government's seriousness about addressing climate change if they pledge to cover the shortfall in funding when museums, as is inevitable, drop that sponsorship. Will the government do so?
The noble lord will be aware that the museums act as arm's-length bodies, and therefore it is up to the trustees of each museum to scrutinise potential donors and make their own judgments on this.
My Lord, for the very first time, I find myself in absolute disagreement with the noble Earl Clancarty. I believe it's very important that museums and galleries should receive sponsorship. And how do you draw the line? Do you say that if a bank, where BP Banks gives some sponsorship, you don't accept it? That is utterly ridiculous, and it is totally against the interests of our great museums. And I don't mind saying to my noble friend that I'd be delighted to receive some sponsorship for the art gallery I'm struggling to save in Lincoln from BP. Very good.
Well, I can't speak for either BP or the art gallery in Lincoln, but I would just reiterate these are complicated and sensitive decisions which the trustees of each museum need to deal with.
My Lords, will the government consider designating other regional museums as national to better and more accurately reflect their national and globally significant collections, but also, crucially, to try to prevent their gradual decline due to the local authority funding cuts?
The government doesn't have any plans to designate any other museums as national museums. Moves have been made to increase the funding to regional museums, in particular through the Arts Council England, and obviously we're very keen for them to thrive, and we've seen new museums open regionally and also important loans which have really boosted visitor numbers in a major way, and we're keen to see that continue.
My Lords, may I make the following suggestion? Many other large cities in the world have a hotel tax. One only has to go to New York to see it's quite a large percentage of what one pays. What about having a hotel tax in some of our cities, particularly London, where we're awash with tourists all the time, and using at least some of the proceeds of that as a contribution to our museums and galleries?
Well, again, the Noble Lord makes an interesting suggestion. I think our broader view is that we expect museums to continue to be, and galleries to be continued to be funded with a mixture of public money, philanthropic money, and other forms of fundraising.
Lord Greaves.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name.
My Lords, I'm pleased that the case of Dr Chang was successfully resolved following the provision of new evidence by Dr Chang and reconsideration by UK Visas and Immigration. UK Visas and Immigration continually utilise customer feedback and experiences to review processes and procedures with the aim of enhancing services.
My Lords, this was indeed an unusual case in that the Home Office gave in before the bitter end. About 20 years ago, I first came across immigration and nationality issues with the Home Office when a busload of asylum seekers were dumped on an industrial estate in Cone in the middle of the night. Experiences then, and I'm sorry to say since then, have led me to believe that too much of the immigration and nationality section of the Home Office is riddled with what I would call bureaucratic incompetence tinged with institutional racism. And nothing has improved. In fact, it's got worse. Recently, I think the co-chair of the Green Party suggested that the immigration and nationality function should be separated off and made into a separate department, starting again based on a culture of efficiency and humanity. Is that something the Minister will put forward to her colleagues for the Queen's speech?
Well, certainly that last point the Noble Lord made about a culture that is far more humane, I would totally subscribe to, as does the Home Secretary. In terms of the balance between bureaucracy and subjectivity, actually it was the criticism of subjectivity that led to a much more objective way of determining applications. He refers to the coachload of asylum seekers 18 years ago. I'm afraid neither the Conservative Party or myself can answer to what happened 18 years ago. And he talks about the Home Office giving in before the bitter end. Actually, no, the case was resolved very quickly. Not that I in any way tried to defend the fact that it could have been resolved quicker.
A government that thinks there's far too much red tape and what they describe as bureaucracy, it's revealing that when it comes to how the government deal with work visa applications, rigid application of the very strict rules seems to be the order of the day. And the reality is that this decision we are considering in respect of Dr. Chiang only got changed because there was a lot of adverse publicity about the actions of the Home Office and influential people took up the case. Can the government tell us how many other decisions of a similar kind to Dr. Chiang's have already been taken and enforced by the Home Office under its now renamed hostile environment policy because the individuals adversely and unfairly affected were not able to get the necessary publicity and support of influential people to get the Home Office ruling changed? Does the government know the answer to that question? Does the government care about the answer to that question?
My Lords, we certainly do care. In answer to the Noble Lord's question, actually the issue was resolved very quickly, and it is not correct that it only got changed because people intervened. It got changed because new evidence was produced that had been asked for. The fact that we have a 98% grant rate for such applications, I think, is evidence of how many people successfully apply.
You may recall that I wrote to her regarding a young Indian girl who wanted to come and visit her relatives in Liverpool to spend Christmas with them. She applied twice for a tourist visa and twice was turned down. The Minister very kindly put me in touch with the relevant Home Office official, and it was found out that the reason that she was turned down was because there was an unexplained sum of money in her bank account. She was working, fully employed in India. The unexplained money in her bank account was the money from her father to pay for her trip. Referring to what Lord Grieve says, do you not think that officials should be have more sensitive and humanitarian touch when dealing with these particular applications?
Well, I do, and I agree, and the case was resolved, which is good. And as I said to the Noble Lord Rosser, 98% of these types of visas are granted.